This is something I've been wanting to cover for quite a while, as I think it's something that would appeal, at least thematically, to the vast majority of my viewer base. At the expense of being cringe, I think anyone who has kind of conservative or traditional values could really like and get into this show, even if they're not normally an anime fan. In contrast to the flood of stuff that comes out of Japan, like ecchi, harem anime, hentai NTR, and other stuff like Rent a Girlfriend, we show a couple who gets married and has a stable relationship at a young age. We show a healthy relationship between male and female. We have a supportive wife who's not a bitch and isn't high maintenance and is there for her husband, and a cast of characters who aren't narcissistic sociopaths. And I'd watched this back when it came out in early 2021, but I felt I kind of needed to sit through it again in order to do a proper review. And after watching Rent a Girlfriend, I needed something to clean out my palate, and my choice was to go with the most wholesome anime I could find, or chug some bleach. And fortunately for you and for me, I decided to go with the former. Now, as you may have judged from the title, this anime is called Over the Moon for You, although depending on the translation, it might be Fly Me to the Moon, Always Adorable, or Cute No Matter What. I like the name Over the Moon for You better. Maybe it kind of reminds me of my childhood in the book Good Night Moon, where like the cow flies over the moon, if I'm remembering that properly. Also, Fly Me to the Moon is just so overused. And as an Evangelion fan, whenever I hear that song, I start to cringe. So for the remainder of this show, I'm going to be referring to the show as Over the Moon for You. So let's get into our premise. Our main character is Nasa Usaki. His parents decided to name him NASA because they wanted him to be as intelligent, successful, and grandiose as the American organization. Now, I don't really know too much about written Japanese, but apparently the pronunciation of names is different from how the names are written. So his pronounced name is NASA, but it's written as Starry Sky, which I found kind of interesting. It's kind of like how Ichigo can mean number one, but can also mean strawberry, if I'm getting that right. So anyways, Nasa was named by his parents. He grew up having a lot of kids make fun of him for that. But in a lot of sense, it does seem that the name did pay off, because NASA, as far as we can tell, has a genius-level intellect. He was consistently the brightest, best-scoring student at his school. I think he scored first in the national mock exams. He got into one of the most prestigious high schools in Japan. His high intelligence tends to make him see things in a very Max-Min way. So he'll live a lot of his life trying to kind of optimize. For instance, he came to the conclusion that the best way to get your daily amount of nutrition is to make hot pot, where you just get the exact right amount of nutritional ingredients, throw it into a pot, and eat it. He also does things like there's a family whose bathhouse was going to go out of business, and he fixed all their accounting and got them subsidies and did all this other stuff. And he keeps all his important documents in a safety deposit box in the off chance that his apartment gets hit by a meteorite or burns down. He can also be a little naive and goofy. He's not always the best at reading the room or understanding other people's feelings, and he has a certain childlike innocence to him. But on the whole, he's just an extremely nice, standout guy. He's the kind of guy you'd want to be your best friend in real life, or the kind of person who, if you're a boss, you'd want working for you. So that's our first main character. Now, in the first episode, he's out in the winter in Japan, and he spots the most beautiful girl that he's ever seen in his life, our second protagonist, Tsukasa. He immediately falls in love with her at first sight, and he's trying to cross the street to talk to her, but he gets hit by Truck-kun. Fortunately, this is not an isekai, though, so he manages to survive it because Tsukasa knocks him out of the way and she gets injured herself, but not nearly as badly as NASA does. So she calls a hospital, or the truck driver calls a hospital, and she starts to leave and just tells him to forget about her. And he basically crawls over and he just like, you're the most beautiful woman I've ever met. I'm in love with you. please go out with me. And she's initially about to turn him down, but he references the story of the bamboo cutter and the princess from the moon. I need to read that at some point because that seems to be referenced a lot. I know in Okami, the video game, they reference it a lot, and it's frequently referenced throughout this story. Obviously, the title is "Fly Me to the Moon." Is "Over the Moon for You." So he says that he's ready to fight for her and do whatever it takes for them to be together. And she seems to be very touched by this and says, "I'll go out with you if you marry me." To which NASA immediately agrees. Then we cut to 2 years later. NASA was in the hospital for a while. He didn't wind up going. I'm not sure if he did go to high school or not. It's a little confusing. But he's living in a small studio apartment, working at a part time job. And despite his immense intellect and success in school, he's depressed that the girl he's in love with hasn't shown up yet. During this time, as I said earlier, he meets a family who's trying to keep their bathhouse going. So he manages to fix all their finances. I think he builds like a cleaning robot for them and does all the other stuff. And I think both sisters, one of them definitely has a crush on him. And then the younger one, I think, also kind of has a crush on him. She says later that she was hoping that NASA was such a spurg that in like 15 years, when he was a successful scientist, he would come back and marry her out of desperation. So he's chilling at his home, and then one day there's a knock on the door, and Tsukasa shows up with a suitcase and a marriage form. And she's like, "Are you still down for marrying me?" And NASA's like, "Yes, definitely, 100%. So in the first episode, they get married. Now, obviously, it's not a formal ceremony. The title seems to imply that they'll probably have a marriage at some point. It's really weird in Japan because despite most of the population not being Christian, like 90 to 95%, most people get married in Western or Christian style weddings. I've heard a number of different reasons for this. I think part of it, though, is just that Shinto ceremonies are very expensive and difficult to put together. So they might have a second wedding or something later on, but they sign the paperwork, submit it to the office, and now they're legally married. And then that's that. There's no will they or won't they. There's no harem. There's no crappy love triangles. We have our couple together and they're married. Now, because they don't really know each other particularly well yet, there's a lot of awkwardness between the two of them. Neither of them really seem to have experience in prior relationships. So it's kind of funny, so because they're like technically married, they can probably do just about anything and it wouldn't be immoral. But they're like really nervous about holding hands and stuff. And NASA's very innocent. He's like, "Oh, I wonder if she'll let me hold her hand. I wonder if she'll let me hug her." And they're kind of faced, like, the first problem they're faced with is they don't really feel comfortable sleeping together yet. Partially because NASA's bed is too small, but also because they kind of want to get to know each other a bit more and get comfortable with each other before they do something like that. So they go out to, like, I guess their equivalent of IKEA in the middle of the night to get some a mattress or a futon for Tsukasa to sleep on. And NASA like wants to buy her the nicest one because he wants to make her happy. And we see a reoccurring trend that I think really endeared me to Tsukasa, where she's like, "No, you don't have to get me the most expensive one. This one seems nice. It seems very cost effective. Let's just go with this. I don't want you to waste your money on it." And that happens a number of times throughout the show where he wants to buy her like the nicest TV he can because she likes movies. He tries to buy her a really expensive diamond ring. And she, generally speaking, is like, "No, I appreciate the gesture, but we need to save our money for like other more important things." And she normally talks him down into getting something more reasonable. And this is very much in contrast with how a lot of romantic comedies go, where the woman is like some crazed, narcissistic spendaholic who just bankrupts the main guy to buy like designer clothes and stuff like that. And that very much sets the tone for their relationship. So the next couple of episodes, we have them kind of getting to know each other. It's kind of funny because Tsukasa wants to like make NASA happy, so she's gonna clean his apartment, But NASA being the way he is, it's already spotless. To her surprise, though, she finds NASA's fridge is full of good quality, wide range of ingredients. Because, like I said, NASA tends to just make a hot pot where he just throws all the proper things in and eats them. So she starts cooking him, making him home cooked meals on a regular basis. And they're just very happy about that. They go and meet the family that owns the bathhouse. There's some comedy where the girl who has a crush on NASA doesn't realize that Tsukasa and him are together. She's like, oh, she has Usaki. She has the same last name as NASA. She must be his cousin, or something like that. And there's a lot of comedy involving that. We have Tsukasa's adopted sister, or something like that, who's trying to get her back and trying to get her to leave NASA. And she's like, no, I'm a married woman now. I want to stay with my husband. Actually, it's interesting in that episode because they try to, like, they kidnap NASA and they try to take, like, pictures that make it look like he's cheating on her with these two maids. And she gets there and then she reams him out for being, like, a philanderer. She's like, I'm going to give you a piece of my mind, mister. And then she takes him out of the room. Then she's like, no, obviously you didn't cheat on me. I know you wouldn't do that. Let's just get out of here. And it's really nice, like, to have that basic level of understanding. Because in a lot of animes, she would just beat him up and be like, you're the worst. And it would be played for comedic effect. I don't think she hits NASA, like, once during this. She says that he's an idiot a couple times when he is being an idiot. Or just says that he's naive. But that's more of kind of an affectionate thing. And then, like, the second arc of this show is they need to get a bigger apartment, preferably one that has a bath in it, because they have to go to the bathhouse every day. And so they need to get the place co-signed by NASA's parents. They find out that he's married, and they're like, what? And then they tell him that he has to come with them, too. He has to go and get their blessing, and only then will they sign the lease agreement for them. So they go on a magical mystery road tour. Interestingly, Tsukasa is very knowledgeable about history, but she really doesn't like it. She likes modern pop culture stuff. And we see very early on in the show that there's definitely something about more to her than just who she appears to be. Because she talks about, like, stuff in Kyoto as if she knew the people. There's a part where his father's an archaeologist where she just reads something from an old Japanese that that most people can't read. And like I said, there is the strong connection to the moon, obviously. Now, as a side note, something that irritates me about this show, and this is something I've complained about a lot, is this idea that if there's any age difference between the couple, it makes the man a pedophile. So I think NASA is 17, and Tsukasa, at least biologically, is 16. So, like, people say NASA's a pedophile for marrying a girl who's, like, 1 year younger than him. Now, I think the age of consent in Japan was, like, 14. The point is that there's nothing, like, vaguely illegal about it. They're well within legal age of consent. They're well within legal marriage range. But people are like, he's just a little bit older. And I know, like, in Rent-A-Girlfriend, people called the main character a pedophile because he was 20 and he was dating a 19-year-old girl. And sorry for bringing Ralph into this, but people said he was a pedophile for dating a 24-year-old girl when he was 34. So it's just really obnoxious. I hate it because I think it waters down the term pedophile. And it makes what is, in my mind, it's hard to think of a crime worse than hurting or just fucking with kids. And it just waters that down and it makes it like this irrelevant thing. It irritates me when people talk about this show in that light. Not a ton do, but I figured I'd bring it up because it's something I keep seeing and it's just really annoying. If he was 16 and she was like 12 years old, then we can maybe talk about it. So they go, the parents give them their blessing. The parents are really happy that someone's going to take care of their son. It turns out their apartment burned down, so they move in. There's an extra apartment that's owned by the bathhouse people. So they move in there, and then we have some stuff like buying. Oh no, I think they bought a TV earlier on. They have like the bathhouse people over and they play video games. And our season ends off with them having their first kiss in a park. They're still very nervous about things like holding hands and kissing and stuff like that. Like I said, it's just a show where it's exceedingly sweet. The two people complement each other very well. They have a sense of unconditional love and support for each other. They kind of round each other's personalities off. And it's just nice to see like a functional marriage. I want to tell you guys a secret. Historically, most men loved their wives. Even in societies where there was like arranged marriages or you tended to marry the girl next door. If you look back at like what people write about it, and I have like a friend who for a project had to read a bunch of Civil War letters. A lot of it is just men saying, I miss you, I love you, honey, I want to come back home. Like just stuff like that. This idea that like men just viewed their wives as like baby factories and they didn't have a healthy relationship with them is just kind of absurd, especially when you get into kind of the lower classes. Because with the upper classes, you have happy marriages, but when you get into like the very rich people or the king, they tend to have a lot of mistresses. I guess kind of a standout with that is William the Conqueror, who, to our knowledge, never cheated on his wife, had like 8 kids with her, and very, very deeply loved her, which kind of counteracts all the truly horrific things that he did. So, once again, it's nice to see something that is a healthy male female relationship, a couple successfully getting married young. I'm really excited to see what kind of stuff happens in the next season. Maybe Das is going to go to university. Maybe he's going to try to get a different job. Maybe just something else really wholesome and sweet is going to go down. So, like I said, I really enjoyed this show. I highly recommend it. It's probably one of my favorite anime. I don't know if it's for everyone, but I think even if you don't like anime and you don't like the show, you can at least appreciate the wholesomeness and what they're trying to do with it. So that's my review of Over the Moon for You. God bless, and more content to come.